Hello, amazing people. First off, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. You're tuning in to Love Tribe, the channel that strives to make enlightenment the trend. We're not the only ones, but we're one of the few out there. Enlightenment. Why is it valuable? Well, it definitely helps in the development of your emotional intelligence. So much attention is given to mental health nowadays and to the concept and importance of self-love, but not enough is given to the value that enlightenment holds when it comes to developing that side of our intellect, our emotional intellect. And recently, let me just double check. I was checking up on an amazing article today that was basically talking about the James Webb Space Telescope. With all of the compiled evidence that these scientists have been putting together since the early 2000s to now, they have finally concluded in a very concise statement that unknown invisible forces sustain 95% of the universe. Unknown invisible forces. So, if unknown invisible forces are powerful enough to sustain 95% of our universe, how much more powerful is then not your mind to basically sustain and create the life that you want? It is even more powerful. So, we're going to dive into talking about how aspects of your mind have a direct effect, not just how you see your life, how you see yourself, but like the concept of having a joyful life. It's not a destination, it's not a location, it's not a design of circumstance. Seeing your life as joyful, recognizing it as joyful, has everything to do with three factors that require your awareness, require your, you know, discernment. And in order to apply that, that's what we're here for. That's what this channel is here for. So today we're going to talk about how emotional intelligence affects your choices, your relationships, and your identity, and how the combination of these three impact your ability to see your life as joyful, and how you control that, how you have access to that, and you're able to actually control that on behalf of yourself and your self-awareness, not for others and not control others and outcomes, but within yourself. Okay, that's really important. So, unknown invisible forces sustain 95% of the universe. Scientists that have been studying the images and the collection of data, a lot of it stemming from the James Webb Space Telescope, has led them to this conclusion, or part of their conclusion. So, our universe that is so vast, so full of beauty, and so full of chaos, that at the same time allows for organization to exist, is basically sustained by invisible forces, right? And then we want to dilute the value of our lives sometimes into our mind not having the capability of expanding it to be more. We want to dilute that at times, and we shouldn't, because your mind is, if we're going to compare it by comparison, comparable to an invisible force. You can't really see your mind, but it's there. You can't touch your mind, but it's there. You can't travel to your mind, and you can't get images of your mind, but it's there. Okay? So, emotional intelligence and our ability to view our life as joyful, when it comes to it, there's three things that affect it, and those three things are your choices, your relationships, and your identity. So let's start by talking about choices. Choices. We all like to have freedom of choice. What do I choose? I'm going to choose this because I love it. I want it. You know, choose what makes you happy. Choose to do you. I often say that when it comes to a pair of shoes and when it comes to some trendy item in a retail store. I'm like, oh my God, I must have it. And so nowadays, you don't even have to go to the store. You could just go online and see it and be mesmerized and want it in your closet, right? But choice is so much more than that. A choice that you make today can impact segments of your life that can either become beautiful, wonderful, or can be the most traumatic that you ever experience. But no matter what it is, it's always a result from a choice you've made, either today, yesterday, or way back then. And there's no escaping choices. That's the other thing. Like, how can we get around not having to be at a crossroads? You can't. Life is about choices. Now, there is no perfect selection. Don't think that if you were to select different, your life would be better. Your life would be different, but there's not a guarantee that it would be better than wherever it is today. It is no guarantee that it could be better financially, emotionally, or mentally. You know, what creates the idea, or I would say the illusion of, oh, it would be better, it would be different, is the fact of us always thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. And nowadays with social media, we get a lot of the grass is greener on the other side view or perspective sometimes. But again, apply discernment. That perspective is not 100% real. You know, many of you watching know this. Some of you maybe you don't. Or maybe me saying it is going to allow you to like confirm it deeper for yourself. People post on social media the life they want you to see, the life they want to expose, the expression they have of themselves. And so much of it is beautiful. Let's stop thinking that everything on social media is the worst. So much of it is beautiful, yes. And so much of it also has the ugly side to it. Nevertheless, when it comes to even that outlet, you have a choice to what you subscribe and follow, and to what you don't subscribe and to what you don't follow. You're choosing that. So analyze your feed before you start to say the world is this or the world is that, or you start to even compare your life. Analyze what your feed is. You might need to unfollow some things. You might need to unsubscribe to some things. Why? Because it's not the person you want to be. It's not the choice you want to keep making anymore. You're not going to be able to make new choices different, to have that different whatever it is that you want now for yourself, if you continue feeding yourself the same feed from the choices you've made that were not the best for you. It wasn't the best person. It wasn't the best scenario. It's not the best account because it's not feeding your mind anything positive, anything graceful, merciful, anything empathetic, anything also spiritually clean. That's another thing that we have to choose. You choose what spiritually works for you. And spiritually, when I'm referring to being spiritually clean, has nothing to do with religion. I'm talking about your energy. Having an energy source of yourself, an energy field of yourself that is clean, requires you to change what you subscribe to, change what you see, change what you view. Why is it that we as adults, we are so protective of our kids, for instance? And I'll say that from a single mom perspective. We're so protective of what they watch. We're so careful to make sure that we filter out what comes across their eyes. We even put filters on our if not smartphones, on the accounts that feed into the smartphone, you know? We put filters on that, filters on our TV on demand, filters on our YouTube, filters on whatever for the kids, right? Because we're careful. We want to filter their feed because we want to make sure that their mind is not polluted with viewpoints and perspectives and ideas and information that will make them choose something that's not good for them. So we do that for our kids, right? We need to do that for ourselves. Everything that you apply to another for the good, you need to do for yourself. So scroll through what you're following. You might have to unsubscribe, or you might have to hide what they post because you don't want to see it. You don't want that to keep feeding into your eyes, because what you see does get registered in your mind and does develop into a pattern of thinking that then results in how you make your choices, you know? Now, another reason why, when it comes to seeing your life joyful, why choices are so valuable is because when you apply self reflection, the choices you've made that have led to horrible outcomes will start to make you feel like there's nothing to be joyful about in your life. You're going to start to develop a sense and a feeling of guilt, and it's not going to lend itself to allowing you to choose different, because you're going to choose what you've always been choosing because that's all you know, and you're comfortable with that, and you know what to expect from that scenario. Um, And self-love does play a role in how you make these choices. That's another reason why developing your emotional intelligence is important, not so much to say that you're enlightened, but more so that you can, with the strength of knowing how to love yourself, just by applying it, just by doing little acts of it day by day, eventually that amount of love becomes your default, and then you apply that to how you make a choice. How will you know what choice is good or bad? Your energy is going to feed back to you. And the one that gives you the calmness, the option that gives you the feeling of you can sleep at peace, that is the choice you should be making. The option that makes you excited, almost like a child that is doing something that then you need to hide from your parents, that is the choice you should not be making. You know? And you're able to feel this if you allow yourself the chance to actually pay attention to your intuition. Your intuition does guide you in making those choices. Um, Another reason why choice affects our ability to see our life as joyful has a lot to do with our brain, how our brains are wired. Dr. Newberg, which is, he's a leading neuroscientist, he wrote the book, How God Changes Your Brain. It's one of my favorite books. And in this book, there's a chapter where he talks about the frontal lobe and the limbic part of your brain. The limbic part of your brain is regulated by your feelings, your emotions, your sense of wanting to defend yourself. Your frontal lobe is regulated or is ruled by logic, reasoning, problem solving, and language, where your language skill comes from. Dr. Newberg described how between those two, the limbic and the frontal lobe, there is a structure or a set of neurons called anterior cingulate. And these neurons are actually called von Economo neurons. I don't know why they're called that, but these neurons in the anterior cingulate section of the brain, between the frontal lobe and the limbic part of your brain, they help to balance your limbic system with your frontal lobe. The anterior cingulate is like a fulcrum. It basically it creates a seesaw effect in your brain that then determines or helps you determine your ability to make choices. Now, you may say, well, how does this information help me when it comes to choices, and what does this have to do with joy? Because maybe in understanding what has been strengthened for you or not, maybe it'll help relieve the guilt that you carry with yourself. Because maybe you realize, you know what, I've never actually done something or I was not aware of that, and I didn't even know that you could apply certain exercises to strengthen a set of neurons that are literally there to help with balancing my reason and logic with my emotions. I didn't even know that that was a thing. I just thought that I was horrible. I thought that I was a bad, let's say a bad daughter, for instance, because I just wanted to do what made me happy. I never realized that maybe I was making choices primarily based off of my limbic system because I was young. As a matter of fact, um, psychologist Bauman, and I'm gonna see here because I these are readings that I do, things that I'm interested in. Donald Bauman, Robert Cialdini, and Douglas Kendrick, in 1981, they did a study on altruism and self-gratification, and they determined that when it comes to altruism, which is the ability to do gestures and acts that are unselfish, to make someone else happy. When you're young, when you're a child, children, as a matter of fact, they see no reason and no point or purpose in doing anything to make another person happy or to make others happy. They don't understand the value of that. They don't understand the value of that. As a matter of fact, the subjects that they had in their study from 1981 to, I believe, 1990, the subjects that did understand the value of that and did finally get it over the course of these 10 years, they realized it was the subjects that got older or that were older. Because over time, obviously, in 10 years, the people that they tested, they kept um, they touched base with them to get current feedback and compare it with like the previous year and the year before. So they determined that acts of altruism and self gratification, whether you delay it or you want it immediately, the delayed self gratification and the ability to make another person happy and understanding the value of that was mostly understood by those that were older, not by children. So when it comes to choices in your limbic system, which is what children tend to use more, they tend to go more based on their limbic system. Their logic and reason isn't developed yet. Logic and reason requires experience so that wisdom can be built, so that you can then make your choices and solve your problems with that, with your experience and wisdom, rather than with your feelings and emotions, which tend to be spat out by your ego. So when you're a child, you're more likely thinking on the me side, what makes me happy. So, yes, understanding this, knowing this, knowledge of this, the reason why knowledge is power is because it allows for you to not be manipulated by the negativity that tries to come in to your mind and tries to make you feel horrible for the choices you've made, builds a tremendous amount of guilt, which then in your mind becomes what manipulates you into staying limited in your growth, in your authenticity, in your ability to be compassionate and loving. Because then you close yourself off because you don't trust that the next choice you can make is going to be a good one. So that's why this knowledge is powerful. That's why knowledge is power. And that's also why this is directly linked to your ability to see your life as joyful. The more you understand that this takes place, not just with you, but everyone, we start to then not allow guilt to manipulate us anymore. Guilt is still going to exist, but it doesn't have to manipulate you. It can't. Because now you know what's going on. It's almost like now you know the backstage of the game. Now you know that everything you see in a reality show is scripted because you've seen the script, basically. So I'll share an example from my side. In my 20s, I thought it would be a great idea to just start living on my own or with the person I was engaged with and just go about that. My parents thought it was a horrible idea. And the outcome of that was negative for me. I ended up choosing an option that resulted in me being single, getting divorced, right? And I realized that the choice I made to start a life with someone, to go on a particular path with someone, was the worst choice I could have made. And I made that choice when I was emotional, when I was disappointed and angry that my family didn't understand why I was making that choice. And I realized that the pain I caused them for not listening and for not wanting to take things in a different route resulted in the guilt that became built up in me, that resulted in me feeling like the worst daughter, the most unworthy daughter. And all of that journey only added to the rubble that built inside my heart that basically closed me off to my own family, you know? So it wasn't the best thing. As time went on and that experience settled the feelings that came from the divorce, because divorce brings up a lot of negative feelings into your mind, into your heart, that affect you. It's not easy, even when you want to have the divorce. When those feelings subsided and I was able to look at things logically with reason and calmly, I finally realized that I couldn't handle the weight of that guilt. It was really difficult. It was hard to talk about it. It was hard to hear my family express how I made them feel. And the reason why it was hard, it wasn't because I did not care. It was because I couldn't handle the fact of how a simple thing that I thought it's what makes me happy. It's what I need to do. It's my life. How many people it affected and how deeply it affected them. And I couldn't deal with the weight of the fact that I caused that, you know? And that guilt manipulated me into basically closing myself off. But closing myself off in a way, not so much where I wasn't there for other people, closing myself off to myself. See, that's what's tricky about guilt. It doesn't necessarily just have the ability to manipulate you to be closed off to others and to then be angry with others or be, not trustworthy to another person or to not trust others, is what I'm trying to say. Guilt has a way of also manipulating you into this space where you then don't consider yourself to the point that you don't love yourself. Like, self-love isn't even a concept in your world. Like, self-love isn't even a way of life or a thought in your mind, you know? And the more time that goes on that is existing that way because of guilt, guess what? The more likely you are going to make choices that are a repetition of that path that's taking you towards that route of more guilt, you know? So as you look into ways to easing that weight off, you know, meditation may be recommended, but more than just meditation. Dr. Newberg suggested in his writing of this book that it's not just meditation, it's also spiritual practices of worship and prayer. They actually show, and I'm going to read a phrase here that I caught that was quite interesting, that just made it just explained to me something that in psychology is so important. The more that you strengthen the frontal lobe with meditation and spiritual practices of worship and prayer, you're also going to stimulate the anterior cingulate, which balances your limbic system with your frontal lobe. So you want it to be balanced. You don't want it to be too much of one side and too much of another. You want it to be balanced. So the more you do these practices of meditation, spiritual practices of worship and prayer, You stimulate this collection of neurons known as the anterior cingulate, and this allows you to pursue your conscious goals in life with a greater purpose and serenity. Serenity is synonymous with peace. A strong frontal anterior cingulate, again, this is the location of the frontal lobe. So a strong frontal anterior cingulate circuit also inhibits anxiety, depression, and rage. This is a wonderful piece of information. You want to know how to inhibit anxiety, how to inhibit depression, how to inhibit rage. Inhibit means to stop. It stops existing. Your brain doesn't allow it to even like come into existence anymore. Practice meditation. Practice some kind of spiritual form of worship and prayer. Okay? Uh, Now I want to clarify, none of the spiritual practices he mentions has anything to do with dark stuff. It's all related to some form of religion. If you're Jewish, if you're Catholic, if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, whatever religion you are, practice the worship and prayer that is connected to that. If you're not of any religion, meditation. You know, meditation also works. Why is this important? Because the anterior cingulate neurons are directly linked to compassion and peace in the brain. Compassion and peace. The more that these neurons are stimulated, the more compassionate and peaceful you can actually see your life. And you will make choices from a peaceful state of mind. You will make choices from a compassionate state of mind. And compassion requires you to be altruistic, to not just think of yourself, to think of others involved in the equation. So science actually proves not just that emotional intelligence has value, but that worship, prayer, meditation have the ability to fortify neurons that actually regulate your brain's ability to process compassion and peace and act from that space. This is amazing because then we understand that we can exercise this mentally. We can mentally do this. Now, this is not an overnight thing that's going to happen. This requires you to do a little bit every day. Take one day at a time. You know, that's all you could do, then just apply that. One day at a time. Because this is a seesaw effect. You will have days where you feel more loving than you do feel angry. You will have days where you might be more angry and then you don't feel as compassionate those days. And that's okay. Don't be so pent up on always having to be balanced. It's impossible to be balanced in a world that constantly throws things at you that exist to purposely put your limbic system on the rise. You know, today's goal in society, based on what the media puts out there, is to have you living off of the limbic system, to have your amygdala constantly stimulated by fear, anger, emotion responses that kind of keep your survival mentality on point, as opposed to the opposite, which is to help you with that balance. Now, you're in control of that. You're not in control of external forces and of the world and what the world presents to you, but you're definitely in control of how you exercise your brain, because you're the one that's feeding that into it or allowing that feed to happen to it. And people might say, well, I'm trying to get, the breaking news. I need to know what's going on. No, you don't need breaking news. You don't need to break your mind. That's what breaking news does. It breaks your mind. It doesn't allow your limbic and your frontal lobe to be balanced. It actually just puts the limbic system to the highest it can possibly go. And it has you afraid of like the weirdest things that, in terms of probability, are not even going to happen. They may not happen. Oh, but they also might happen. Well, guess what? It was going to happen anyway. None of the choices that you could have made could have altered the outcome of that anyway. Okay? Why is this important? Because it's logic and reasoning. Your logical side is your mathematical side. Your frontal lobe has the mathematical side on point there. So your mathematical side understands law of probability. There's a percentage of yes and there's a percentage of no for every single thing. So let's stop thinking that just because you're afraid of it, it's going to happen. There's a percentage of yes and percentage of no. You might also fall into the percentage of no because the yes option is very hard to always be yes all the time. It can't be yes for everything you're afraid of because then all of that would happen to you. Doesn't make any sense. So then you limit your choices. You limit your ability to make choices because then you're basically making choices always out of fear. So you're not going to put yourself in experiences that are going to expand or grow you. You're going to be limited in your life. Now, for some people, they may not recognize this. They may not think this way. They may not understand it that way. And it's okay. You know, I'm not here to discuss topics and to say that this is 100% how it is and you must understand it this way and follow this. No, enlightenment is the delivery of information that allows something additional to be inputted into your mind for you to understand. Enlightenment is not about forcing ideas. Enlightenment is about adding ideas, adding information, adding what one person knows to the next, and so on and so on. So the domino effect of what we know is what ends up developing our emotional intelligence with each other. You know? Dr. Newberg also mentioned that in his book that meditation, prayer, and a belief in a loving God may not be enough to eradicate the limbic system's tendency to distrust people who appear to look or think differently. Instead, you'll need to bring your spiritual practice into your social interactions with others. Okay? This study or this book from Dr. Newberg and Bauman and his study with Robert Cialdini from 1981 determined that the only way to actually understand what is compassion and what is peaceful is through social interactions. The reason why the children in the Bauman study don't understand or didn't understand why making another person happy was important is because they didn't understand empathy, because they lacked the social interaction aspect of it. They were too young. They were mostly with family members, always being cared for by someone. They weren't interacting in a social setting outside of the environment they knew, so they didn't see that. So they still had to learn that. Now, Newberg, what he describes is the fact that just meditation, prayer, and belief in a God is not enough. You know, you definitely need to put your spiritual practice into your social interaction with others. And it's very much about like what the Bible talks about. Faith without works is nothing. You know, you need to apply it into your social interactions, not just speak of it, not just talk about it, not just think about it. Actually put it into your interactions. Social interaction strengthens the anterior cingulate. That's another reason why putting it into action is important. Is not so much just to show off that you're doing it. It's because it stimulates those neurons that keep you on the compassionate, peaceful circuit in your mind. Okay, so those interactions and applying those behaviors in those interactions will continue to strengthen the anterior cingulate, which is the collection of neurons that helps to balance your emotions with your logic. So interacting with as many different people as you can is wonderful. Attend social events that include different cultures and ethnicities and visit different churches. Experiment with unfamiliar forms of meditation and prayer, and share your experiences with others who are on a spiritual path. This is from a doctor who's been a neuroscientist for decades, and this is what he wrote in the book of How God Changes Your Brain. Basically, not just God itself as an entity, but the belief in God, how that changes your brain. And there's more in this book. He also goes into talking about how the way we believe in God, centuries ago is different from how we believe and understand God to be today, because as a species, we have evolved to have a different understanding, a more enlightened understanding, which allows for us to not allow guilt and shame to manipulate us on such a long-term, forever life kind of basis. So he's noticed the difference that people who finally get it and aren't manipulated by their guilt and shame, he noticed how their brainwave activity had was much more active, much more lucid, much more rapid and healthy than people who did allow guilt and shame to take over and manipulate their way of thinking and way of living. He noticed that those people who allow for shame and guilt to manipulate them, their brainwave activity is not as rapid, um, and the brainwave activity is not as healthy and not as on point when it comes to making decisions in pressure situations and emotional situations. It's just not. Their ego speaks too loudly. That's one thing that he said here. The ego speaks too loudly, doesn't allow for them to understand how to apply benevolence, you know? So, choices, they require you not just to consider, what is it that I'm picking? And I'll put this into I'll use a story of mine when it comes to choices. In my life coaching moments, I had a client that was basically living um, a routine life, and they were feeling like the routine life was just boring them to death. They were feeling like the choice they made is what got them stuck to have a life that was routine, the same thing Monday through Friday, and then the weekends, and it was just repetitive. And so they felt that because of the choices they made and the responsibility they had as a result of those choices, they now had to stick to the same thing to make sure that they didn't lose their foot on the water, their footing, if you may. I came in, and the goal that they were trying to achieve was to be able to appreciate their life better, take the routine out. But here's the thing. Sometimes the choices you've made, yes, they do result in a routine that you can't get out of because there's things that rely on that routine. And then you start to feel like you're trapped. And that's the reason why this person felt like they couldn't choose something different now moving forward. Because choosing something different would make them feel selfish, would make them feel like they're being inconsiderate to the other people that relied on them. But here's the thing. The people that were relying on them, and one of those people, or two actually, was their kids, their two kids, they were getting served the energy of a miserable person. So those kids were being negatively impacted by that miserable energy from their parent, right? Turns out the kids felt trapped in that energy field. They didn't want to be in that home anymore. They snuck out at night. They were getting caught doing certain things at a certain age, and so that was freaking them out. But at the same time, this person wanted to get out of a routine in their life because it was just now overwhelming them emotionally. Well, in analyzing their life, I actually came to find out what they considered a routine was actually stability of time. See, sometimes we make a choice to handle things a certain way because we feel like we have no option at the time, or that's the only option we can take because it's what's going to provide us what we need for now. And then now becomes 5, 6, 10, 15 years. And before you know it, you're like, my life is the same thing every single Monday through Friday and weekends, and then every month and every this and every that. You're not realizing that what you have is actually stability of time. How so? Because you already know the time it takes for you to do all of that you consider a routine. So you know what time you're not needed to do that. You know what time you can be off. You know what time you're not working. You know the times in which you can be absent from that routine. Why? Because A routine means the same thing, stability of the time. It's the same thing, it's a repetition. Now, some of you might say, well, not necessarily, because in this job or in this career, this happens or that happens. Okay, but it's still the same position that you're doing. There's some form of stability. For every single thing that we've chosen to do with our time, there's some form of stability with time related to it. Meaning, you know that that is a set time of the life that you have that is occupied with that, right? Well, that might actually be a super positive thing, due to the fact that if you didn't have that, your mind would not know what to do with the availability of time that was not in a routine. As much as we like to envision that having a free life, carefree life, vacation life, full time seems to be the dream, everyone seems to aspire to that. And, oh, become a life coach and make thousands of dollars to millions of dollars with motivational speaking and go into modeling and do this and do that. Not everybody is meant for the same mission. Not everybody is meant for the same set of choices. Not everybody is meant for the same route or, path. So you can't be listening to the glamorous side of the $1 million lifestyle and forget that no matter what choice you take, a routine will be necessary. So find a way in your routine, and this is what I did with this client. I had them list what they did, what their activities were, what their work life was like. I came to realize they had a set period of times that they were not working, that they did not have anything on the agenda, that even as being something on their agenda felt to them like it was a routine of their life. But then I helped them realize, that these are the available times, or these are the times that you're not in that workspace or in that work mode, right? This is the time you have to do whatever it is that you want to do. The exact thing that the other thing you wish that you could do that during that time. Just try it, give it a shot. Because even if it's twice a week that you take to do something other than what you do routinely, your mind is going to start to feel and understand and think and create patterns of, my life is not a routine. I have some things that are exciting. Why? Because it's going to be new. The activity is new. You've never been doing that before, even though that free time space was there for this client. She had never incorporated that into her life before that way. She thought that in order to do that other, and it was a hobby of hers that she wanted to transform into a business, right? She thought that to do that, she needed to quit her job, do something drastic, like quit her job, invest in a space, and only then she could start doing that thing that she was passionate about. I came in and I was basically like, no, you don't. You can take the free time you already have. Do the thing you would know you would do if you knew that the outcome is going to be amazing. Just do it, regardless. Sometimes do it because the act of doing that is already going to mentally make you feel like your life is not a routine. And that's going to propagate what? Feelings of compassion with yourself, of peace with your life, enhance the sensation of your life being joyful. That energy field is going to become the energy in your home. It took about 2 to 3 months for this person, for my client, to put that into play, right? To finally start to see an energy shift in her life and to notice a change in behavior, even in her kids. It wasn't a point of her having to ground them, punish them, yell at them, scream at them, take their phone away, not give them their allowance. She didn't have to do any of that because she focused energy on applying herself to that hobby that she loved, into those hours during those 2 days of the week that she wasn't on the clock or in work mode. She used that energy for that. That shifted the energy, not just for herself, with her mind, with discovering a new passion for the life she had, because now she knew she had stability of time. She knew the 2 days and the time in those 2 days that she could devote to that activity that she loved to do. And in doing so, it made her happy to go to work. Why? Because she knew when she wasn't going to be at work and she could devote the time to the other thing that she loved as well. You don't have to wait to do drastic moves to choose different in your life, is what I'm trying to say, so that your life becomes joyful. You can make a choice to do a very simple, small move to add things to your life, to alter the routine of your life. And routine is not negative. Routine could be an indication you have a stability of your schedule. You have a stability of knowing that your schedule is repeated over a set of days, which could actually be really good. Now, can you take time off and take vacation? Of course. I think vacation is something that everyone should choose to take. You need that. Can everyone choose to take it at a particular point in time at the same time? Not always. I think that you should choose to do that when it is, financially okay for you. You should also choose to do that if for your own mental health you need a break. Okay, so those two factors come into play for that. But just being able to do small, simple things that are part of yourself, that in your mind you imagine wanting to do, and maybe even turn to a business, or maybe not turn into a business. It's just something you love to do. Choose to do it. Check your agenda. Sitting down and having my client write down her routine took I'll be really honest, took like 40 minutes for her to write everything, down and make sure that she wasn't missing anything and discuss what those things were. About almost 40 minutes to talk about it after they were written down fully. To make the choice to actually do the activities during those 2 days or 2 days of the week that she had available time was a snap of a finger once she realized that those time slots were there. Just because you sit in the car, wherever it is that you are, and you think that your life is just the most boring of all, you're only seeing it from the perspective from where you're standing. You're not seeing it from the perspective of a person that would do anything to trade places with you. But that's not to mean like today you may feel like if somebody traded with you, they would want to trade back. But we have moments where we all think down of what's going on because the feeling of being overwhelmed it doesn't discriminate. It exists for everybody. And that's why compassion is important, so that we don't act towards others in entitled, disrespectful, inconsiderate ways. Because the way you're behaving with another person may grow in them more disrespect and more hate and more resentment. You're basically planting horrible seeds of negativity into another person. And it will affect you. Because if that person doesn't choose to do something negative towards you, life itself is going to give you the feedback of that energy. Because you don't get what you want in life, you get who you are. You don't get what you want, you get who you are. So who you put out is who you get. You don't get what you want. You want to be treated like a king, but you're treating everybody else as if you're the best and you should be first place and only your feelings matter, and you lie, cheat, and steal. Like, I'm just being very general, you're not going to get what you want, which is to be treated like a king. You're going to get back who you are. You're going to get people who don't trust you. You're going to get people who fight and argue with you. You're going to get people who disrespect you. You're going to get people who don't appreciate you. And if you don't get people, you get situations where all of that happens. And you're like, why am I getting that? Like, I don't deserve that. I deserve to be treated like royalty. You can't be treated like what you want if who you are to others is not even like close to that. And again, it all stems from choices. And then that's why you don't see your life joyful, because you're constantly choosing to do things with others always in last place and yourself always in first place. And that's the issue with today's new age mentality and self-love. It's not about putting yourself in first place. It's about knowing how to love yourself So then you understand the value and the importance of how to love another human being. That's the mental health self-love concept. The society media trend idea of self-love is put yourself first. Do what makes you happy. Do you, boo. Who cares about anyone else? They should be happy for you. No, that's still being inconsiderate. That's still being um thoughtless. That's still being selfish, you know? Do what makes you happy. Well, there's a lot of people that have hurt me and have insulted me. If I were to do what makes me happy at that moment that I realize I got hurt by someone, I wouldn't be happy right now. So you can't do what makes you happy in the moment. You can't be tricked into that. Self-love is about this. Because I love myself, I am not going to jump into a relationship until I'm ready to handle that responsibility of how I make someone feel. Because I love myself, I am not going to just physically give of myself to whoever, because at the moment I just want to do what makes me happy. I want to do what makes me feel excited. No, you love yourself. You value yourself. And it's at such a higher level because of that, that now you understand how to also give to another, to also show another how to love themselves also. That's also a part of self-love. Your ability to show others, to be an example of how they should love themselves and of what love is. And that's a beautiful thing. These are all based off of choices. You're choosing to move with integrity. You know, you're choosing basically to um, move with good intention, move with serious intention. There's no such thing as taking relationships casually. You can't take relationships casually. If you choose to take relationships casually, you're basically telling the universe it's okay to take you casually. So no one's going to be respecting you. No one's going to take you with respect. No one's going to take you in with compassion and love and authenticity. They're basically going to take you in a very fake, superficial, casual way, because that's all you are. You're basically telling the universe it's okay to treat you that way because that's how you're doing to others, you know? So you can't want to move with intention and move with integrity, and at the same time take your connections with people casually. Take your friendships with people casually. Take your circle casually. Well, then how many people are going to have in your circle? Because if your table and your circle have an infinity number of spots, I'm going to start to then have questions as to, what are your standards and boundaries? What are you choosing as standards and boundaries? That's another question. That's another choice to make. What boundaries should you have when it comes to relationships? How do you choose boundaries? You know? Choosing boundaries have everything to do with how you see yourself, how you view yourself. As a matter of fact, there was another study that Bauman he's a social psychologist. Bauman in the 80s did another study where basically anytime the subject matter was presented with having to do an activity that had no benefit to them but required them to be honest, when there was when there was an empty room only, the subjects were more likely to pretend they did the activity honestly. They would actually take shortcuts basically to get the task done. The subjects that did the same task but with mirrors in the room, they were less likely. As a matter of fact, 95% of them, I believe he mentioned, did all of the steps with integrity because they were faced with their own image during the moment of going from part A to part Z of that task. So seeing yourself, how you see yourself and seeing yourself does affect how you choose. So yes, are you happy with the reflection you see in the mirror? Because that reflection is the individual that made the choices or that's about to choose what they're about to choose. So in the moment of taking a step towards something, choosing your boundaries, consider looking yourself in the mirror and ask yourself what is and isn't okay with me. What am I okay with? What am I not okay with? In my friendships, in my relationships, in life. And the reason why we have to do this is so we start to learn, well, then what should I maneuver different so that I can start seeing my life with more joy? Because joy is a perspective. Joy is a state of mind. Joy is not a location. It's not a design of circumstance. It's not a destination. It's a state of mind. You're content with how life is, even in your struggles. Why do you struggle? Because you feel like, oh, I made the wrong choice months ago, or I didn't complete, I didn't complete this goal, or I didn't actually, I didn't save enough, or I put my kid in the wrong school, or I shouldn't have gotten divorced, for instance. So you start to think of all of those things that you've chosen before, and now you don't know what you are or you're not okay with because you haven't asked yourself that question. What am I and am I not okay with? Looking in the mirror. Looking in the mirror allows for you to answer that honestly. Numerous psychological studies show that. Um, I'm going to grab the book again so that I can, if I find the page while I'm talking, I can mention it. Because Dr. Newberg did a similar science study with a couple of his patients where he was giving like a financial reward for one particular task to a group, and then he did the same or similar test with that group like a few weeks later without a financial reward, and they or yeah they had to select. Actually, they had to do a coin flip. I'm sorry. Newberg did a study where they had to do a coin flip to determine if they'd get the task where they get financially compensated, or the task where they don't get a financial compensation and the outcome of the task has no benefit to them. So they would do a coin toss. All the people that got the option of doing the task with no benefit obviously wanted to pick the one with the financial benefit. But in picking the one with financial benefit, he then separated that study into doing the activity or doing the task um, in a space that they didn't have to face anything or anyone. They just had to complete the task. And a couple of them, knowing they're going to get compensated for completing it, some of them still did or took shortcuts and were not sincere about how they got from point A to point Z, right? When he put a mirror in front of them and asked them to do a similar task with the financial compensation, all of them in that study did the steps A through Z honestly and did not take shortcuts, and they wanted to obviously ensure their financial gain. Now, mind you, the only thing that changed in that test was the presence of the mirror. So, two different scientific people, different decades, did similar study with the presence of the mirror that confirms that when your mind is presented with you visually doing wrong, it can't handle it. It can't justify it. And the fact that people do wrong and they're okay with it is a sign that their limbic system is completely non-functioning, and their reasoning and logic system has enabled for a lack of compassion and a lack of empathy to exist. Because when numbers take over, it's really hard for feelings to have a space. The same thing goes for, when it comes to family and inheritance. People will fight over an inheritance in a family, but they won't fight with each other to see who's gonna take care of the older relatives. Even though the taking care of an older relative is emotional, it's based off of how you feel for them. They won't fight over that, but they'll fight over an inheritance, you know? So your brain can't contemplate, can't see and process you doing wrong when you're faced with yourself. And if it can, compassion and empathy is basically kind of shut off. So where there's a consideration of only numbers like a computer, there's no room for feelings. So when we want to question, well, why do people choose evil, for instance? Why do people choose to do bad? Because that's really what kills joy. Well, they're choosing that, and that's their journey, that's their path. That's not your life and your path and your journey. But you're observing it, and your sense of moral righteousness is flaring up anger in you because you want to go in and correct it, but there's no way to correct it other than just to be angry and express anger. Again, society will show us and feed us that information because the whole goal is to have the set of neurons that balances your emotions with your logic out of whack so that you don't make decisions based on logic. You make decisions based on emotions and fear because that's how they control and manipulate people. And then you are basically suffering the side effects of what that does into your personal life. And you're not able to see joy in your life. You're not joyful about your life. And you should be. You know why? Just because you're breathing. If you have a device and you can even listen to this and you can hear my voice, that is a huge blessing. There's so many reasons to be joyful just looking around. Look at the sky. Look at the clouds. Look at the branches on the trees. Look at the street, how they intermingle with each other, intersections, the cars, the people. Just take moments to stop and look. Looking around and just taking it in is also a form of meditation. When you look at a person, you're looking at an entire universe and story and painting that you only see a couple of colors. Imagine what more they have behind that makes up who they are, them. Just imagine that. Just like when you look at a tree, for instance, you don't see the whole entire tree in one shot. You may think you do, but you blink, you see the tree, but you're not seeing the details. Start to look closely, you see the beautiful leaves, you see the branches, how each leaf has its own little connection to the wooden twig that is connected to the branch, and that branch is connected to the trunk of the tree, and all the other ones are connected along with it. And notice the designs they make on the wood, the wooden trunk. Notice the shapes of the leaves. Like, when you start to have an appreciation for these minor details, you start to see the reason why there's joy in life. You can't fix the world problems by talking about them and saying how wrong they are, but by creating a mental landscape that starts to process life as joyful. You're creating an energy shift already. And that starts with what you choose to do from here on out. It doesn't matter what you chose before. It doesn't matter how guilty or ashamed you have been because of what you did before, because of your choices. What matters is the choice that you make today going forward. That's what matters. Who you choose to be today moving forward. And sometimes you have to prove to yourself that you really are solid in that choice as well. You may have to come face to face with some people, not because you want to prove to be right, but because you really want to show that you truly made a choice of peace. The world needs evidence of that because it has enough evidence of the opposite, of what's evil, of what's cruel, of what's selfish, of what's mean, of what's inconsiderate, of what's lonely. Okay? So choices definitely have an effect on seeing your life as joyful. You know, choose to let go of arguments and not care about being right and not care of pointing out who's wrong. Because I promise you, if you were going to lose those people that you're trying to prove yourself with, the proving right or wrong for yourself won't matter if those people are gone. Whether you love them or not doesn't even matter. Because if you don't love them and they're gone, why do you care about having to prove yourself anyway? But if you do love them and they're gone, what was the point of proving yourself? You just wasted time. Your ego gets you into your feelings. Your feelings is your limbic system limiting you into a space that doesn't allow you to be compassionate, doesn't allow you to be peaceful, doesn't allow you to be forgiving and loving. And neuroscientists have basically been figuring this out and writing about it to help us understand this is far more than just a spiritual movement. It's also a scientific one. You know, enlightenment is not just a spiritual movement. It's not just the idea of, oh yeah, I know about energies and energy fields and rocks and stones and crystals and whatever, which quite honestly, you don't need any of that. You don't need any of that. You don't need anything in your life to bring in positivity other than what you already exercise and practice in your mind as your thoughts. That's what you need to change. No amount of saging is going to alter that for you if you don't start to alter that from within yourself with choosing different, with choosing another option. Okay, so choices are really important in order to see your life as joyful. I used to have a hard time when I was I would say in my 20s. I used to have a really hard time. Yeah, and I'll say my 20s because I know the video is really, my friend when it comes to how I look, but your girl didn't get wisdom overnight, okay? Let me get comfortable. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I didn't get wisdom overnight and just wake up with this ability to talk these lovely enlightened ideas. This is a result of a lot of wrong choices. That's why people who make wrong choices are the best people to go to for advice because they've already seen a variety of outcomes that's been crap on their face. So, in my 20s, in relationships, it used to be really difficult for me to not have the last word. I needed to have the last word. I needed to be right. I wanted my side to be seen and heard. And it was such a struggle and it was so draining and exhausting. And now I realize that none of that is worth it. It was all a horrible route, a horrible choice. And it was also a lack of me accepting the other person as they were. So then I realized, how can I say I loved someone or that I had love if the choices I was making of my own behavior were that of someone that just wanted to change somebody else. But in retrospect, the people that, or in this particular case, the one person that was in my life at the time has pretty much already, we've had a conversation and they've admitted now that they actually felt very much like themselves. They never felt like I didn't let them feel like themselves, right? But my memory of how I conducted myself is that I was trying to change them. They were not ready for that. See, sometimes you're taking the choice of wanting to help someone, making the choice of trying to help them change. But if they're not ready for that and that's not something they want, it's going to work against you. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to spend a lot of time and you're going to become emotionally traumatized from it. Not because of the person, you become emotionally traumatized because of the amount of energy you use trying to change their behavior with you. trying to force it to be different, they're not ready for that. They can't see that. And even if you are the better option for them, I even had someone from my past tell me I was the best option for them. I was the option and they messed it up. And so I've come to realize that even if you're the best option for someone, you're the best friend for someone, I don't know, you're the best child to your parents, to your mother, to your father, you're the best one. If they're not ready to bond with you in that way, if they're not ready to appreciate you in that way, you can't force it. You can't even talk them into it. All you could do is choose to pray for them. All you could do is choose to go is the opposite. You have to choose the opposite, which is to not force it. You have to choose to let go. You have to choose to let go of your wantingness. Yeah, I'll make a new word, wantingness. You have to choose to let go of your wantingness to see things different between you and those people or that person. And that's hard to do. I know that's hard to do. That's like the hardest thing to do. But you have to do that for your own health. Because if you don't do that, you know what's going to happen? You're going to be emotionally traumatized. You're going to be disconnected from friends and family. You're going to take your self-esteem to the lowest point of your life. And then when all of that comes at you after everything's said and done, you're going to have immense feelings of guilt and shame that you even allowed it to get to that point. And then you have to repair and heal from there. That's part of the reason why solitude is important. Choose solitude. That's another reason why people sometimes don't see their life in a joyful way. They haven't given enough time to be in solitude. They haven't chosen solitude even as an option after having, breaking points in their life with people. And this is not just romantic. You could have broken up with someone that's a friend or with family. Solitude allows you the time necessary for you to come to grips with the fact that you have to heal. You have to heal yourself first so that you don't take that into your next connection. So choices are really valuable for everything I just mentioned. The next thing that's also valuable to have a joyful life is your relationships. I mentioned a little while ago how you can't have an infinite set of spots at your table or in your circle, because then the question is, well, what are your boundaries and what are your standards? Not everybody's supposed to like you. Not everybody will like you. So if you have an infinite amount of seats, let's say you have 100 seats at your table, some of those seats are going to be filled by snakes. People that you believe are there for you, but deep inside they're not, because wherever there's greatness, there's also the opposite of that energy, like jealousy. A couple of them are jealous of you. They can't even control it. You have to forgive them. They don't even realize that it's in them. It's their nature, It's almost like if you have a dog, you love your pet. I have a dog. I love him. Right now, he's somewhere in the house. I don't even know he exists sometimes because he's such a chill dog. He's a Tibetan Terrier, black and white, I rescued him from a shelter. But here's the thing. I know my dog is a dog. I'm not going to play on the floor with him or put my face next to his regularly, because if he gets angry or has a snap moment for whatever reason, he might bite me. It's in his nature. I can't hold it against him. It's in his nature. He may only realize after he did it that it was wrong. As a matter of fact, that did happen actually. After rescuing my dog from the shelter, which by the way took me 3 months to find the perfect dog from a shelter to bring home as a gift to my daughter, because I didn't want to buy one from a pet place, even though we visited a couple of pet places. But the moment the people at the pet store said, oh, if he dies, you could just come to the store and we just not refund you, but like we'll get you a reimbursement. We'll get you a new dog. I was like, no, I can't. Like, it's an organism. It's a living thing, So my friend, Miss Bryan, I worked for the Hits 97.3 at the time. he was doing a promo for the Broward Animal Rescue Center. So I started visiting the rescue center and the Humane Society to see what kind of doggies they had. And I was visiting it almost every other day, about every other day or 3 times a week for 3 months to give my daughter, her birthday present. It was 2018. I believe the year was 2018. I started in like the end of August, going into September, then October. Her birthday's in November. Well, I couldn't find the right dog. November 11th, I still hadn't found the dog. And I was so disappointed. I was walking out of the Broward Animal Rescue Center feeling like I give up. If it's not meant to be, it's just not happening. I was walking out of the establishment when from the clinic part of the rescue center, um one of the workers came running because at this point they knew my name. He came running out and he said, "No, no." He said to me, "Carla, my name's Carla." He said, "Carla, just hang on. We just got a van came in and had a couple of dogs from the street rescued. There's one I think will be perfect." I wasn't trusting at that point. I was like, I'm already about to give up, but sure, I'll wait another couple of minutes to see this doggy. So they go and take a picture of him. I wasn't allowed to go into the clinic portion of the Broward Animal Rescue Center, but they took a picture of him and showed me the picture, and he looked he had the worst tangles. He had dreadlocks everywhere because his hair grew tremendously over the course of like a year and a half that he was on the street. Because Tibetan Terriers don't have they don't shed. They have hair, and the hair grows like our hair does. And because it obviously wasn't getting washed or he was roaming the streets, they started to become like dreadlocks. So he had dreadlocks. They showed me the picture and they started shaving off some of his hair and they showed me a next picture of him. Um, I was feeling like I don't know if this is the dog. He looks like he's so skinny. He looked like he was gonna die, like he was starving. Like he just looked like so sick. And I showed the picture to my daughter, I get on FaceTime, I show it to her, and she's like, "Mommy, that's the one." I was like, "Really? Are you serious? Are you sure?" It's November 11th of 2018. She's like, "Yeah, that's the one. That's the doggy. That's the one I want." I said, "Okay." So I did a donation to the animal rescue center. They held the doggy for me. They did their due process. 4 days later, we picked him up on her birthday. It was a Friday. Brought him home. Now, why do I say this? Because I was talking about how it's in your dog's nature to possibly bite you accidentally if that happens. Well, since he was rescued and he was so grateful to be rescued, his behavior was great here. He didn't move out of his bed. He was potty trained because he wasn't having any accidents in the house, which was great. He was not barking. I was like, "Oh my God, this dog's amazing." He wasn't jumping on the furniture. He wasn't trying to lick anyone's face. I was like, "Oh my God, this is what I've always wanted in a dog." His behavior, his demeanor was like if I were to write it on paper to say this is what I want my pet to have, he had it. But a couple times in playing with him, um, my daughter was playing with him a little bit too close, and he, out of anger, just bit her, and then realized he bit her one time, right? This dog put his head down so bad because he realized he bit her. And he actually took himself into his crate and closed the door to his own crate and kept himself there for days and would only come out for me to give him walks because he had guilt written all over his face over what he did. So why do I say this? It's in people's nature to be jealous sometimes. They don't even realize at the moment they're doing it. Once they do it, then they feel bad for it. Because even animals that don't rationalize like you and I can express that. Humans that are so rational and so spiritually connected for sure have that even more, you know? So don't doubt that is what I'm trying to say. You have an infinite set of seats at your table because your relationships are just so extensive. Then what are your boundaries and what are your standards? The same thing goes for like your romantic involvements. Are you taking them all casually? Are you a casual involvement then? No one should take you seriously? You shouldn't be taken serious. You shouldn't be taken respectfully. As a matter of fact, whoever's dealing with you should also be dealing with 20 other people, 10 other people, 3 other people, 2 other people. Like, are you okay with that? Think about it. Like, what is your boundaries? What are your standards? And when it comes to male and female counterparts, both of them should have standards. If you value who you are, then your standards should be just at that level. But I often say that it's the woman that sets the standard for how the relationship is, or what is or isn't allowed in the relationship. The man, or the male energy of the connection, is the one that basically, leads the connection, directs the connection into a space. If the female energy of the connection is sensing that the leading is questionable, well then don't allow yourself to be guided. You can't submit to a leader that doesn't know what they're doing. So your standards are still at play here. The female energy of the connection. Your standards are still the reason to stay or not to stay. You don't shift your standards simply because, oh, I like the person. I think they're cute. They're really, they make a lot of money. They're financially good. They're good looking. They're 6 feet tall. They drive the best car. So you're going to alter your standards to have the connection when they're not even like leading it anywhere productive. They're not leading it anywhere promising. I've had clients who have been stuck in that ring around the rosy scenario with their relationships. They always go for the same type, because the man is wealthy. The guy was, I had this one client, man, super wealthy. He had like 4 cars in his driveway. They were like collection cars. He didn't even have 4 people in the house. He had 4 cars. It was just him. An amazing house. Actually 2 houses. One in Fort Lauderdale and one in Miami Beach. But he always, since he was always going for the same type of girl, he wasn't getting any kind of deep relationship with any of them. Why? Because they were the same type. They were the type that were just there because of his things. They weren't there because of him. They didn't care about his character. They cared about his cash app. They cared about how much he cash apped. They cared about, how many carats are on the ring, not about his character. So they didn't stay for a really long time because they didn't want to be led by him. He wasn't even leading them anywhere because he was consistently sticking to a pattern of a type of person with a type of relationship because that's what he thought would make him happy. But every time it would just turn out to be something casual. He just wanted something pretty to be on his arm, much like Leonardo DiCaprio and his 20-year-old girlfriends. I mean, come on. What are we afraid of? Accepting that aging is happening? Aging is actually a beautiful thing. It allows for you to see life with more serenity, with more calmness, with more joy. How about that? With more joy. When you're around people that are like that, you're going to love yourself more because they make you feel amazing. It's hard to not love that because that's what your nature wants to feed off of. Even though we think our nature likes what's exciting, our nature likes what's dangerous, our nature likes what is physically attractive. Yes, our nature does like that also, but temporarily. Our nature likes that momentarily. Our nature likes that for the moment. Like, I love to go clubbing with my girlfriends. I love to go out dancing. And I'll drop it like it's hot. I'll twerk for a bit. Momentarily in that moment, that's me. But that's not me tomorrow. That's not me the next day. That's not me all the time. But I like it. It's exciting. It's physically attractive. Why? Because I also get to see physically attractive people. I like to just look at them. doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to want that as something permanently in my life. No, no, no. I want character in my life. You got to want character in your life. Why? Because that's what you're going to be living with 24/7. Your character. You got to know how to be able to navigate in and out of that so you can enjoy your life. You can't keep avoiding certain things out of fear that it's just going to take you down a route that you shouldn't go. Especially when we talk about, like, how people view spirituality and religion. They avoid doing things because, oh, it's bad for your soul and you're not going to be please. Are you telling me that you are that weak that if you go and do something or you are in a setting where that is happening, you don't know how to say no? Last time I checked, Jesus was always surrounded by sinners. He wasn't surrounded by purely perfect, behaving angel people. He was surrounded by sinners. Did he sin? No. You got to be able to be in that environment and still have a consistent character. Hold to your standards. Standards and boundaries in relationships is not just about your romantic involvement. And your romantic involvement shouldn't be casual, because then everyone's going to take you casually. And your romantic involvements shouldn't be superficial, because everything's going to stay superficial. You're going to lack feeling intimate with anyone. You're going to lack the joy of feeling that connection that makes you emotional. Because your ability to allow your emotions to exist in you is probably what's hindering you from seeing your life as joyful. Your life is not joyful because you say it's joyful. Your life is joyful because it's a state of your mind. You carry it with you no matter where you go. You shouldn't be feeling like your life is joyful when you're in a nightclub, but it's not joyful when you're in a church. It's not joyful when you're at home with your family, with your husband, with your wife, with your kids, with your parents, with your whatever. It's not joyful there. It's joyful when I'm by myself at the beach, but it's not joyful when I'm by myself at work. No, joyful is a state of mind. It should exist because it's where you're taking yourself. It's with you. It's how your mind is processing your life. How do we get to that point with our relationships? What do relationships have to do with our ability to see life joyful? Your relationships are a direct reflection of who you are. So if you're not happy with your relationships and connections in your life, maybe you got to cut some people out. Maybe you have to stop caring about how they treated you, what they said to you, when they messaged you, when they didn't message you, if they called you, if they didn't call you, when it was, when it wasn't, whatever. Let's just stop that. Let's stop complicating how you see things and just go back to the simple basics. Does that help you see your life in a joyful way? If the answer is no, it needs to be out. Simple as that. It needs to be out. You don't need to try to define it, understand it, justify it, explain it, say why this, why that, try to, some people might say, write a book about it. That's not what you need to do. Yes or no, does it bring you joy? Does it make you see your life more joyful? Remember, your life. Life is not moment only. Life is a bigger picture. Is it going to help your life be joyful? If you have more leaning towards the no, you need to cut that out. If you have more leaning towards the yes, then okay, try to work it out. Okay? How do you distinguish if it's more leaning towards the no than the yes? How do you distinguish that? Well, that's based on an individual scenario that is happening. If we're talking about family, sometimes toxic family members, you have to limit your interaction with them. You should never just cut family out completely, because even cutting family out completely, there's always cycles that happen in life where you're brought back together with those people to try to come to an understanding. But you might have to limit interaction with them in order for your mental health to exist, and that's okay. Now, how do you determine if it's leaning more towards the no or the yes when it comes to relationships, like with let's say your friends? Well, just determine, just analyze, how have they been conducting themselves with you? What do they speak of you? How do they express themselves to you? What do they invite you to? You know, do they stick to their word when you have something organized together? Do they make more excuses about why they can't be present, or do they show up? I think I've mentioned this before when it comes to friends. It's always easier with friends sometimes for us to consider that more than it is with our romantic involvements. Our romantic involvements, we tend to sometimes make excuses and try to justify and understand. But justification understanding has a limit. Like, you can't be applying that all the time either. You can't be over analyzing things to try to understand why this, why that, why this, why that. And also don't allow your ego to take you to a space where you start defining everything as, this is disrespectful. How could they have ever done this to me? Don't complicate things. Does this add to you seeing your life more joyful? And if the answer is no, what can you do for it to help your life be more joyful? What can you do? How can you transform the situation? Do you need to forgive? Do you need to express and let them know you require more time, or you wish you had more time, or you would love to see them? Is there something you need to express that you're not, because out of pride and ego, you're trying to shut it up? Don't allow your pride and your ego to shut you up emotionally. Don't allow your pride and ego to turn off your vulnerability, because that's what makes you authentic. And authenticity is what makes you sexy. Authenticity is what makes you attractive. And authenticity breeds an energy field that people want to be around. It breeds an energy field that even you want to be around. You don't, and then when you want to be around, you don't want to leave your home space. You love being with yourself. You love going to the beach by yourself. You love exercising by yourself. You love it so much that someone's going to have to really win you over out of solitude and show that it's worth getting out of solitude in order for you to, choose something different. Okay, so relationships, who's sitting at your table? Who are you sharing time with? Sometimes it's better to have 10 friends that are valuable in your life. They add value. They're people you could go for advice. They could go to for advice. You can go to for insight. You can go to because you trust them. They're not going to, share your life with the world or with other people, or, put you on the, under the bus when it's convenient for them, than to have 50, 100, 200 friends and you can't count on one of them to be there on a bad day to talk to you. So numbers don't always mean value. Numbers don't always mean quality. You can have a person that has 1 million followers, but their content has no value. Has no value socially, has no value emotionally, has no value spiritually. But they have 2 million followers on Instagram. And you could have someone that has an account that only has 200 people, but their content is valuable. It is valuable emotionally. It is valuable mentally. It is valuable spiritually. What they release out there has a value, and their message is valuable because it's adding positivity. But they only have 200 followers. So numbers don't always mean value. Numbers don't always mean quality. Numbers don't matter when it comes to value, actually. It's not about numbers, it's about the message. Relationships are not about numbers. It's not about how long you've been together. It's about what's the value of that relationship. Just because you've been together for 10 years doesn't mean you should go ahead and get married with the person. As a matter of fact, why you're together for 10 years and you're still not married? That would be the question, and probably that's not the person you should be with then. Deciding to marry someone isn't rocket science. It shouldn't be something that takes you umpteen years to figure out. It's a feeling. If you can go, I think I just told this to someone today. If you can go to a dealership and come out with a new car, or with a car that you've selected, that you've bought because you wanted to buy that car, that same feeling that you have for that scenario is the same feeling you should apply when it comes to relationships. This whole mentality of like, yeah, but you got to test drive and see how it is when you live together. BS. Nope. I don't drive my car that I bought from the dealership for 2 years and then figure out that, you know what, I don't like this car. I want to return it and get a different one. They're not going to take my car back after 2 years. This is where standards come into play. If you're the female energy of the relationship, or even the male, like whoever's making the choice to cohabitate, no, make a different choice. Your standard is you don't cohabitate unless you're married, because that's for married people. That is not for people who are not married. Why you shouldn't cohabitate when you're not married? Because there's a lack of commitment. You don't have a commitment with each other. And some people may say, well, there's couples that have never married and they've been together for 50 years, living together. They don't have a lack of commitment. They maybe just never did the paperwork of a marriage, but they don't have a lack of commitment. And again, that's like winning the lottery. Not every person can have that setup and it works. I would say to hold to your standards. Cohabitation without marriage is the worst thing you could do if you are the female energy of the relationship. It's the worst thing you could do, even for yourself. You're not guaranteeing a commitment. You're not guaranteeing even a marriage. All you're guaranteeing is that's going to be where you started today, you're going to be that way years from now. Why? Because if people can drive off the parking lot with a car for free, they're not going to make payments on it. They're not going to pay for it. They're not going to pay for it. We have that saying about why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free. Let's not equate women with cows. I more like to think of women, or the female energy of a connection, as a car. I love sports cars. I love to speed. I love to drive. I wouldn't say dangerously, but I would say excitingly. I'm excited when I'm driving, when I'm behind the wheel. If I could, I would ride a motorcycle, but I'm a parent, I'm a mom, so I got to make sure that I survive the years that my child needs rearing and nurturing in order to become a healthy adult. So I'm not going to be riding a motorcycle. I mean, I did race motorcycles at one point as a form of therapy to handle my anger. And it helped. It de-stressed me a lot. But right now I love cars, so let's not equate people to other animals. And I'm not trying to equate women to just cars. What I'm basically saying is you set the standards of your relationship, and whatever those standards are, don't shift them because of your desire to just have a relationship. That's the point I'm trying to make. Why? Because your relationships will have a direct impact on how you see your life as joyful or not. There was an episode of my life where I was connected to someone that gave me this feeling. Definitely, I wasn't seeing my life joyful. What I was seeing my life as was the following. I would be happier in a jail cell on the floor, on a mattress on the floor, than with this person. I've been in that scenario, so I can definitely tell you your relationship has a lot with how you see your life as joyful or not. And sometimes your pride will keep you stuck in a relationship because you don't want to admit that it doesn't work. And your life is not joyful anyway. Don't think that just because you're holding on to something, it means that you're joyful in your life. That you're still gonna have a happy scenario. Happiness and joy are state of mind. It's a constant state of mind of choosing that as your option. You can't make that even a possibility if you're stuck in relationships that don't breed that. You're stuck in relationships that don't feed that. You're stuck in relationships that they don't breathe joy into your life. They don't make you feel that. So you have to analyze your relationships and determine if it's making you joyful or not. And if the answer is no, well, then maybe you need to cut them out. Solitude is not so bad. Sometimes solitude is the relationship you need in order to bring joy back. so that you then know how to start a new connection with new people, new connections, new friends, new romantic involvements with a joyful person that is you. But you get that out of solitude. You don't get that just out of constant recycling yourself into different relationships thinking you're going to find joy. Joy is not something you find, and it's not a destination. It's a state of mind. So it's not about the relationships, it's about your state of mind, so that you can pick the relationships that keep that fed that way, in that direction. Okay? So that's how relationships affect your ability to see your life as joyful. Now, the last factor that affect your ability to see life as joyful is that of identity. Identity. Who am I? Who am I? You know, when I was a teenager, I used to have this imagination that I would be this kind of like celebrity person. But I didn't even know of what, because yeah, I loved singing, but I didn't want to be a singer. I loved acting, but I couldn't see myself on a stage or doing movies. But I know I wanted somehow, some way to be kind of like in the spotlight, you know? Turns out that it wasn't that I wanted to be in the spotlight that way. It wasn't that. My identity was being formed in that I just had this feeling of like, I love to stand out. That's my identity. My identity is I love to stand out. Stand out how? Stand out with my style, with my fashion, with my way of being, my way of speaking, with the knowledge that I have. Like this knowledge that I don't even know where it comes from. Also, the way of speaking that just engages people, makes people want to listen. I noticed I had that from a very young age, because friends would come to me wanting insight, wanting advice, wanting tips on how to study. And that just kept going on and on and on as I, went into high school and then college and then university and then as a professional in a career and then life coaching. It just became, I realized my identity was never connected with the concept of being a celebrity. Like society tries to point out that that's the way of life, that's the way to go. If you really want to, have a platform. No, my identity was to stand out, but in terms of helping others realize and recognize their best self. So your identity plays a big role. In order for me to actually embrace that my identity as who I am today, it took me time. It took me self-awareness, reflection, understanding, and all of this required time, which means I had to age. So at a young age, my identity wasn't fully understood for me. Like I knew I was a woman, I was a girl that was going to grow into a woman, and yes, I knew I already had a particular preference. I understood that. I'm not talking about identity in terms of like sexual preference. I'm talking about identity in terms of who are you? What makes you the way that you are? Like who is that? And how do you apply that into the world? How do you apply that into your life? What does your identity have to do with your joy? Well, being able to talk and express yourself. And again, it all goes back to, how your mind works. If you're not able to express yourself and express your thoughts and kind of share with your life, and your life is what? It's your work, it's your family, it's your friends, it's your romantic involvements, and it's yourself. If you're not able to express yourself authentically, how you really feel and think, then you're going to feel trapped. You're going to feel almost like you're trapped and you just want to come out. You want to come out and just express yourself. And I don't mean in terms of like what you wear and who you choose. I'm talking about just express yourself in terms of what you think and how you see the world. You want to express yourself. Now, that is very important to how you see your life as joyful. Because in order to express yourself and in order to share who you are with the world, you have to be willing and understand that the feedback and the response may be defensive, may be against you, may be in disagreement. You have to accept it because everyone can't agree with you, or else your point of view wouldn't be unique. Everyone agrees. We all have the same viewpoints. What's the point? So under that understanding of like being different, of people not accepting or being defensive, only comes when you're ready to let go of the ego. And to let go of the ego, or to not allow the ego to be taking over in your mind, it requires you to be a person who's gone through some pain. And the pain that I'm talking about is pain that usually happens from experiences in life over time. So no, it has nothing to do with age. Age has nothing to do with this understanding, because you can have a kid who's gone through traumatic, painful events at an early age, and it has already gotten them to a point when they're a teenager where their ego doesn't really matter to them. The ego doesn't rule them. But it's still very unlikely, because a lot of psychological studies show that for young people, it's very hard for them to control their ego. It's very hard for them to tame their ego, because their mindset is very much set on what is gratifying for me. The mind is set in selfish mode still. So it does take time for you to have experiences that are painful enough for you to actually have your ego tamed, for you actually to have humility as your base, as your foundation of how you express yourself, of how you allow your identity to shine through. Like, even for me to just be here talking with you guys like this, to have the confidence to discuss and to say everything I'm saying, regardless of how judgment or lack of judgment might happen, required time. I would have not been able to share this in the earlier stages of my life, because I wouldn't even have the experiences to back up what I'm saying. So that's another reason why enlightenment has value, because enlightenment usually will come from people who have, like John Campbell talks about in his hero journey theory. You go through an awakening that happens that basically takes you all the way in a cycle that takes you on a journey back home, where now you know how to be a hero, because you've known how to conquer yourself. You've known how to conquer the demons within yourself. You finally understood how to conquer what challenges your identity within yourself, so that whatever that thing is that challenges your identity, it can't manipulate or control you, because you know how to tame it. And what is that? That's your ego. Your ego is never going to allow you to be your authentic self. And your identity is linked to authenticity. Your identity is not linked to your ego. Your identity is not linked to wanting to be better than others. Your identity is not linked with always wanting to come up on top. Your identity is not linked with how much you have. Your identity is linked with who you are. So I had this I've had several clients, and I'll mention them in different episodes. Clients that I life coached, but I had this one client that just, for the life of him, couldn't understand, why he wasn't happy with the financial status that he had and everything that he had, and that was because he wasn't being his authentic self. He wasn't admitting to himself that what he has, or the abundance he has, doesn't make you happy. He was very much living the mentality that money is happiness. You need money to be happy. But none of the things that existed in his life because of money made him happy. As a matter of fact, they kept him busy, kept him overworked, overwhelmed, kept him also disconnected from the people that cared about him. So what ended up happening? It took a toll on his identity, because he wasn't being himself. He had to let go of the idea of money being happiness. Money does not bring you happiness. Money gives you access to resources that make you happy. The resources you have access to make you happy, but not money itself. Money is an energy source. You can't be so connected to it that you have a hard time letting go of it. So money bringing you happiness and then wanting to keep it, in your hands constantly, you're just going to lose it. It's also not going to bring you happiness. The moment I got him to the point of understanding that was the moment he started to allow his true self to come out and to express what really made him happy. You know what that was? He used to love to take nature walks, like on there's like by the highway, these sidewalks that are built in by the canals. He's just like, he told me, he's like, I just want to take I just want to take a walk. Every time I drive by these canals, when I'm in the backseat of my car and the driver's driving me to a meeting and I see that, I just like, oh, I want to stop and I want to just take a walk there. And I just want to cancel the rest of the day. That I feel like that's going to make me happy. So I had to basically commit on our sessions. Okay, I'll meet with you and we'll take that walk. Let's do that at least like once a week. And so I did that for about, I think that was like a month and a half. We did that for a course of like 5-6 weeks. And that was just once a week kind of activity. He turned around after that month and a half, and I remember him saying, you know what, I feel happier. I feel like I'm actually, I'm myself when I'm breathing, when I'm taking those walks. Like, it's reminding me of my childhood. I'm connecting with a side of myself that I had tuned out. Very simple activity. Very simple activity. It took me committing to the time, but my commitment made him in turn want to at least give it a shot. And then he started to realize, you know what? That thing you said about money being happiness, you were right. I am more happy on that walk once a week, while we're going through some coaching things, some mental state, mindset reset kind of conversations. He's like, I'm more happy in those 2 hours than I am the rest of the week. First of all, that was a great compliment to me as a life coach. The second of all, it was also a great compliment because I got to see how it transformed him. So because it started to bring out a happiness. Why? Because it was a moment of disconnecting his mind. It was a moment of not needing to be needed by anyone, of not feeling the need to, I need those 2 hours to make more money. It was a time of, the more money factor doesn't matter. I'm at least going to give it a shot to let it not matter for those 2 hours once a week. And after 6 weeks, he finally got it, because the feeling he was experiencing had more value to him than the dollar sign he was collecting. I would not have been able to give him that if I hadn't put him through that experience. It took him doing the physical act for him to understand. Me just telling him and talking to him about actually doing something like that wasn't enough. He needed to commit to it. And then he started to employ that at work. He would take, if he had a conference call, or if he had one of those, calls, not on Zoom, but where he could be on the phone, and it wasn't a conference call. Let's say he was just having a meeting with another person. They had to discuss some business. He would schedule it on a time where he could take an hour walk outdoors, somewhere where there was, it was like a park next to his place of business. And he would just do the meeting during that walk time. He was more relaxed. He was calmer. He was able to actually share his thought process better with greater ease. And he said that, yeah, maybe some deals took longer to seal. Some deals took longer to negotiate because he did it that way. Some people, because sometimes they needed more time, or they needed to come in and understand a different perspective, because he started coming up with new ideas. That's the other thing. So people that did business with him, that were always used to a certain way of, investing and receiving profit, investing, and they were used to a certain back and forth. Now it was a little bit different because he was getting new ideas. So he not only changed how he saw his life and became a little bit happier because he was expressing himself and experiencing an activity that allowed him to connect to a side of himself that he had disconnected. But now he was also coming up with new ideas. So it was starting to trickle into his business, to his company. So yeah, what you nurture, what you feed within yourself does start to become what you see outside of yourself, in your world, in your life. It definitely does. The Native Americans, I forget what tribe it is, they have a story of the two wolves, where this young boy gets a beautiful drum And his friend comes and asks, "Can I play with your drum?" And the boy's like, "No, you can't. It's new." He's very frustrated. But at the same time, when his friend leaves, he feels guilty. He feels bad that he was so mean to his friend. So the little boy goes to his grandfather for some wisdom and asks his grandfather for some insight on that. He's like, "Grandfather, I have this drum and my friend asked me to play with it. And I said no because I don't want him to break it or ruin it because it's special to me. But at the same time, I feel so bad that I said no. I was mean. He didn't deserve that. He's my friend. What should I do? I feel like I have two things inside of me battling against each other, and I don't know which one is right and which one is not." And the grandfather said, "Well, it's like you have two wolves." And the boy's like, "Yes, I have two wolves inside of me. And they're both telling me, one says that one's right, the other one says that the other one is right. One says I was right to make my friend, to say no to my friend, that he didn't deserve to play my drum. The other one says that no, it was wrong because I hurt my friend's feelings and my friend's feelings is more valuable than an object, than a simple drum that I could just replace. What should I do?" And the grandfather says, "Well, the wolf that you feed is the one that controls you. The wolf that you feed is the one that wins." So the little boy was intrigued and he's like, "Oh, so if I feed the wolf that says I I shouldn't be mean to my friend and I should let him play with my drum, then that wolf wins." So in the little boy's mind now he's thinking that these two wolves inside him are fighting. So now he wants the wolf that has the good feeling, the doing right action to win. So he wants to feed that wolf, right? So this Native American story basically was to teach children the value of doing good, the value of doing good onto another as being more important than the value of things, you know? So it's not so much about, what do I gain from this? Your identity a lot of times is more about how do I feel when I'm in the middle of this? And what kind of feelings should I feed? And what feelings do I want to be the feed that identifies me? Like, what identity do I have? You know? Because your identity is valuable. So all of these three factors affect your ability to see life as joyful. They're worth you focusing on them. Your choices, your relationships, and your identity. They're not isolated factors that don't coexist with the other. They all exist together. They all make up the wonderful person that's you. Don't allow negativity to make you think that you can't repair them and you can't reset them. You can reset this at any time in your life. You can restart anytime, much like a diet. Just because you have one cheat day or a couple of cheat days doesn't mean that everything you've done to be healthy goes down the drain. You can restart tomorrow again, your program, and get right on track and actually do better, because sometimes your body needs a moment of feeling like you've taken a breather and then you restart it. Sometimes restarts are more important for your joy than just giving up and feeling like that's it, giving up is better. No, just restart something different. Restart differently. Don't give up. Giving up is for someone that doesn't value the worth that they have. And if you're looking for a way to have more joy in your life, then you are ready by default or understanding that you have value because you want your life to be and feel more joyful. And in order to get there, it's all about your choices, it's all about your relationships, and it's all about your identity. Don't be afraid to handle each one of these with love, compassion, with authenticity, and most importantly, with the ability to forgive what's already been past, what's already happened. Move forward in a way that is light, that is beautiful, and feed what you want to see more of in your life. Don't feed the negative, feed the positive. Why? Because scientifically speaking, like I've mentioned already, okay, the more you put this into play, the more you activate neurons in your brain that are going to respond with a floodgates opened to compassion and peace, which is exactly what you need in order to see your life with more joy, to see your life as joyful no matter what's going on. Okay? I love you for staying. I love you for listening. I love you for being here with me. I hope that some of what I said helps you. I hope that some of what I share enlightens you, makes you feel better, also makes you understand that whatever horrible has taken over in your life, it is not the everything of your life. It was a moment, and your life is so much more than a moment. Horrible events are like sentences in a chapter of the book of our life. They are not the entirety of our life. We have the ability to restart, to reinvent, to renew every single day. So if all you could think of is one day at a time, then just do one day at a time. Start by seeing your life as joyful today. And I promise you, tomorrow you're going to see it as even more joyful, and so on. I love you so much for being here. I hope that you take the time to subscribe. Check the show more section. I'm going to put some information there for you if you want to know the summarized version of everything I said. And if not, I hope that you have enjoyed this moment and that the sound of my voice has been helpful in your practice of seeing your life as joyful. Because just the fact that you exist is already an indication of the joy that life already is. You wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. It doesn't matter what the world shows to you. There is more divinity in your identity than worldly matters could ever amount to. So start to see yourself that way so that it can become your reality. Because the more of that you input into your brain, the more of that your brain feeds back to you. And then in life, you're going to get a reflection of who you are. Because you don't want what you want. You actually want who you are back at you. And if that's the case, be loving, be amazing. You know, apply that to your choices, apply that to your relationships, and apply that to how you see your identity. And allow your authenticity to shine. And don't care for negativity or for what people have to say that is negative. Just be understanding because you want that same thing back at you. I wish you tons of luck and love and laughter. And I hope to continue seeing you here on my channel. And please share this video with a friend or a clip. I love you so much. Thank you for coming to my sacred space. And I can't wait for the next episode and our next topic. Hopefully it will be just as helpful, if not more. But in the meantime, Love Tribe leaves you with ways to see your life more joyful through choices, relationships, and identity. Peace out.